Have you ever really stopped and thought about how we're connected to the world around us? I mean, really connected on a biological level? Well, the answer is written deep inside every single one of us, in our DNA. And today, we're going to take a look at our surprising genetic family tree. Trust me, you're going to see our relatives in a whole new light.
So let's just dive right in with the big question. How much of your DNA, your personal biological blueprint, do you actually share with other animals? You know, the ones walking, swimming, and flying all around us? The answers? Well, they might just change how you look at life on Earth.
Okay, let's start with our closest living relative, the chimpanzee. So humans and chimps, we split off from a common ancestor, maybe 6 or 7 million years ago. And the result of that shared history? A mind-blowing 98.8% of our DNA is identical. It's practically a perfect match. All right, a chimp kind of makes sense. But what about something a little further afield, like a cow? You probably don't think you have much in common with a cow, right? But genetically, you share about 80% of your genes. That's right. 4/5 of the instruction book that makes you, you, is the same as the one that makes a cow a cow. And it doesn't stop there. Let's talk about our feathered friends, a chicken. Now, our evolutionary paths went in very different directions over 300 million years ago, and yet we still share about 60% of our genes. It's just wild to think that the majority of the genetic code for a chicken is also humming away inside you. So let's just recap for a second here. 98.8% with a chimp, 80% with a cow, 60% with a chicken. This brings up a really interesting puzzle. If our genetic blueprints are so similar, why are we, well, us? Why are we so different? Why do we build skyscrapers while chimps build nests in trees? It's a huge question.
Thankfully, figuring all this out isn't just a bunch of guesswork. Scientists actually have an incredibly powerful tool for reading the stories that are hidden inside our genomes. You know, the complete set of DNA that every living thing has. It's called comparative genomics. And honestly, you can think of it as being a genetic detective. Researchers line up the entire DNA sequences from different species, human, mouse, fish, whatever, and they compare them letter by letter to find out exactly what we share, what's different, and, this is the most important part, why any of it matters.
So let's put on our detective hats and go back to our closest relative. Let's look at that staggering 98.8% similarity we have with chimpanzees. How can we be so alike and yet so profoundly different? Well, it turns out the secret isn't in the 98.8% we share. It's in the 1.2% we don't.
Now that 1.2%, it sounds tiny, right? Insignificant. But in the huge, sprawling language of the genome, it is absolutely massive. You've got roughly 3 billion bits of information in every one of your cells. 1.2% of that is about 35 million genetic differences. 35 million tiny changes that add up to create everything that separates our species. And here's where it gets even cooler. The differences aren't just in the code itself, but in how we use that code. So think of a gene like a light switch. Both humans and chimps might have the exact same switch, but we have different dimmer controls. A gene can be cranked way up in a human brain, but barely on in a chimp's. And that alone can lead to enormous differences in how we develop and function. And here is a perfect real-world example of how a tiny change can have a massive effect. Our immune systems are incredibly similar to a chimp's, but get this, one tiny DNA difference in our red blood cells makes us vulnerable to malaria, while chimps are pretty much resistant. A single genetic tweak creates a life or death difference. And you can see this pattern play out as we look at other close relatives. Just look at this chart. The genetic difference grows. We differ from gorillas by about 1.6%, and from the more distant orangutans by about 3.1%. The further back you have to go to find our common ancestor, the bigger the genetic difference. It's like a molecular clock, ticking away over millions of years of evolution. But this whole method doesn't just explain why we're different from apes. It also helps us understand those surprising similarities to our more distant cousins, like the cows and chickens. It really all comes down to a shared biological toolkit. So scientists have a name for these shared pieces of code. They're called conserved genes. And these are genes that are so fundamentally important, so absolutely essential for, say, building a cell or getting energy, that they've been preserved or conserved through hundreds of millions of years of evolution. They are the non-negotiable, must-have parts of the instruction manual for life. Here's a great way to think about it.
Whether you're building a bicycle or a rocket ship, you still need some basic parts, right? Nuts, bolts, a frame. Well, these conserved genes are life's nuts and bolts. They're the basic instructions for how to be an animal, how to make cells, how to get energy from food, how to copy your DNA. That's the 60% we share with a chicken. It's the core operating system for all vertebrate life. So exploring our genetic family tree it's a lot more than just a fun science exercise. Understanding all these similarities and differences actually has profound real-world applications that affect our health, our food, and even our planet.
I mean, just look at this stuff. By comparing our genome to other animals, we can pinpoint genes that cause diseases and then develop new ways to treat them. We can improve agriculture by understanding the genes that make for better crops or livestock. We can literally trace the path of evolution, figure out better ways to save endangered species, and even develop new vaccines. This is really where that big picture science meets our everyday lives.
So let's end where we began, with a question. We've seen that a tiny 1.2% genetic difference is enough to create the vast gulf between humans and chimpanzees. And that just makes you wonder, what other secrets are still hidden in that huge genetic library we all share? And maybe more exciting, what incredible changes might the next million years of evolution have in store for us?